I've been thinking recently of maximizing what I'm doing on YouTube, what message I'm putting out there. So some people actually subscribe to me, and don't forget, everyone watching this today, subscribe and join if you want to make a contribution to what's going on in my life. £1.99 a month to join, up to £9.99. Every single penny helps. So let's get on to it. So to give this channel meaning, so people can say, right, he's going to be talking about, what's he going to be talking about? So I'm looking now at not looking at hidden history and Roman archaeology, which I'll continue to do, but specifically, I want to look at the active erasing of history all around us today. And I'm going to start off with a name that might surprise you. Leon Trotsky. He was assassinated on the 21st of August, 1940. Now, Leon Trotsky would have been in the position where Stalin was in the 1920s if he had survived, and the whole history of Europe would have been different. But the fact of the matter is, you don't hear about Leon Trotsky anymore. You just don't hear about him. So, and that leads me on to something even as relevant. Now, I'm playing a character in something known as End of Days. The character is a former SS camp officer. Now, the official censors have said that you cannot wear any SS insignia in the filming, even though I'm portraying somebody who was an SS officer in a camp. I'm not allowed to, there's supposed to be none of that insignia. And we're not allowed to use that in any of the promotional posters either. And I'm thinking, the censor's saying this, so what we've got to do, we've got to portray history without any of this sort of Nazi SS memorabilia, because we're not allowed to show it. And the censor's saying, yes, you're not allowed to show it. And I'm thinking, right, okay, this is quite distressing. And then I'm speaking to a friend of mine this morning. I'm saying, is it me, or is the actual basis of the Second World War being erased? So, we're not allowed to mention Adolf Hitler. We're not allowed to mention the SS. We're not allowed to mention any of this. Sooner or later, we will be stopped from mentioning atrocities. Can't even say the word atrocities at the concentration camps, extermination camps, death pits, and all the rest of it. We're not going to be able to talk about that. So, in other words, history, a terrible part of history, will be erased. And then we talk about statues. This is a big thing, right? And if any of these little bits anyone wants to pick out and they want me to do in detail, then please do. So let's look at the statues. So we see in this sort of woke world in the early 1920s, in the early 2020s, 2020, I can't get the words out, 2020s, we look at the removal of statues, and they're saying, right, slave owner statues should be removed. And what we've got to do, for example, General Picton at Waterloo, died at Waterloo, and that was in 1815. So General Picton, there was a connection to do with slavery in General Picton. This hero at Waterloo that was massively responsible for the Duke of Wellington's victory at Waterloo, we've got to remove his statues. So in other words, somebody who fought to keep Britain's independence, the name is to be erased. Slavery, wouldn't even think about justifying slavery. Slavery is massively wrong. There's no level of slavery that is right, so it's massively wrong. But erasing somebody from history. So we talk about the Battle of Waterloo and we don't mention General Picton. That's what we're saying. Okay. Then we go down various other avenues. Okay, similarly, the avenue is, and this is quite weird. So we've got the Confederate War Memorial at Arlington Cemetery that was removed just a few years ago. same time as the Clouston statue in Bristol, right? That was torn down and chucked in the dock there, which I felt was heinous. It was heinous. This is part of our history that we're removing. And the Arling Moor Memorial, Confederate Memorial, was torn down. And now they're spending £10 million to put the statue back up. So you can't have history one way and you can't have history another. You either have history or you don't have history. These things are there for a reason, right? We're not the general, the Roman trained general marching into Rome in 410 to tear down the idea of Rome, right? We're not talking about that. We're not talking about the Christians burning the library at Alexandria in the 400s. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about now. We're talking about actively erasing history. And so, I know you're not going to like this, guys. People are not going to like what I'm about to say, but you're watching Top of the Pops, and part of watching the Top of the Pops from the late 1970s and 80s on YouTube was to get the context of everything that's going on. And half the DJs that were presented on Top of the Pops have been removed because of certain allegations. Some absolutely terrible, heinous, really bad people, but they're removed from the actual footage. And you're thinking, well, isn't it up to us to make a learned decision whether we want to watch this person or not, right? Frankly, a certain Jay Savile, I don't like watching the guy. However, he's part of the Top of the Pops thing, right? So I'm not allowed to make a decision whether he's watched or not because he's already been removed. And then we look at, for example, we think of 28 years later. Now, 28 years later, they did something very daring at the end of that. And you'll know what I mean. Is that footage going to be erased at the end of the film because it's the censors are not happy with it? You'll know what I mean when you watch it, right? A certain figure in history that's been erased is not vilified at the end of that, is actually made into a hero, which is part of filmmaking. So then we get to the nitty gritty. We look at the likes of Blackett and Wilson, and we're looking at the King Arthur stuff. And lots of my subscribers will know what I'm talking about when we say, right, Blackett and Wilson, they had their own take on King Arthur. They wrote loads of books. However, those two individuals have been erased from history because the archaeological and historical establishment do not like what they were saying about King Arthur mentioned anywhere. So their books are taken out of libraries, the books are taken out of shops. People would go into shops and saying you can't sell Blackett and Wilson books. So isn't it up to people who buy the books to decide whether they're going to buy or not? And that's the point. The censoring, we talk about the world of censoring, right? We can't say certain things on the internet, and we can't, and all these different things, right? But it's far deeper than that when you're coming from a historical and archaeological point of view. It really is. Now, and then we're meant to say other things about history which are clearly invented. The recent series to do with the Anglo-Saxons, and I'm not going to be specific, by a certain broadcaster which I occasionally do work for, they were portraying Anglo-Saxons in a certain way which, to be honest with you, as an archaeologist, is completely wrong. Is really, really wrong. It's totally wrong. If you're going to portray history, you've got to portray it in the right way. It's the same as this. You can't have Native American characters played by people who ain't Native Americans. You get Native Americans playing those characters, right? People with disability, you get people playing those characters. And the world that I'm in, the acting world, is that we're still struggling being able to do that. But we don't struggle to make up history, which is the thing that's concerning me. Anyway, so we're going to finish now. It's been 10 minutes. So if you've managed to get to the end, don't forget to subscribe. Join. Remember, press the join button. That's that join button. If you join, it makes a contribution to my work. And maybe I can buy a comb. I've certainly got to shave this off later on. But the fact of the matter is, if you could support me, join, like, subscribe, that'd be really good. If there's any issues today that you want me to cover, or if there's anything that you disagree with, you think I'm bang out of order and everything I've said, just say it so we can have a discussion. Don't attack me or whatever. Don't chuck the knives in. Whole point. That's the whole point. That is the whole point of this recording. You can have discourse, but don't shut people down. Anyway, if you want another video like this tomorrow, let me know. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr chi. Yma o hyd. Or not in the Irish way. Amar o hyd. There you go. It's going to look different without this being a pirate, isn't it? Take care, guys.